The F-16 is arguably one of the most popular fighters in existence. Serving in over 20 air forces from around the world in various configurations, the F-16 is often considered the fighter of the free world. Since its introduction in 1972, the F-16 has undergone countless upgrades, modernizations, and modifications. Thus, it can seem confusing to identify which F-16 is which. In War Thunder, there are 8 F-16 variants from the 5 nations that operate them. In this video, we will take sort of a virtual walk around of every F-16 variant in-game, and we'll point out the standout features unique to each variant. For this video, we'll start at the front, then work our way to the back of the aircraft. We'll also take a look at the cockpit and armament options for the aircraft. The first variant we'll take a look at today is the F-16A Block 10. The Block 10 is one of the earliest variants of the F-16A. It featured no apparent external differences from the Block 5 F-16A and were mostly the same in terms of armament and fuselage design. This variant entered service in 1980 and were used even as far as Operation Desert Storm, when certain New York National Guard F-16A Block 10s were fitted with a GPU-5A 30mm gun pod in what is known as the A-16 project. This will be a theme throughout the video, but I'll just mark the RWR positions every time we check out the aircraft from a certain angle, so we don't have to point it out every time. So from the front, the 2 bulges right behind the radome are the RWRs. From the information given to us by the game, the RWR is the AN ALR 56M RWR. Underneath the left RWR housing from our perspective is the Air Data Probe. Above the Air Data Probe are the AOA indicators, one on each side. The strips on the nose of the F-16A are known as lightning diverter strips. These are conductor strips that divert lightning away from the radar housing to prevent damage. The huge spike on the nose is the pilot tube. The radar on the F-16A is the base model of the AN APG-66 radar. It is a look-down capable radar without continuous wave illumination capability, hence the lack of sparrows. The F-16's continuous wave illuminator has been a subject of immense discussion among F-16 enthusiasts over the years, and the discussions have been mostly inconclusive, with some arguing that continuous wave illuminators were available for the Block 10, but were not installed for some reason. However, a Block 10 with a continuous wave illuminator would have been the F-16AJ. But, due to the small fact that the F-16AJ didn't exist, its role in the discussion means very little, and the fact that it's technically not a Block 10, the original copy of the F-16AJ, which was based off, is not actually Block 10, and I will talk about that when we get there. So, under the radar, we can see the 2 indicator lights on each side of the intake. The shape of this intake tells us that the intake the F-16A Block 10 uses is the normal shock inlet. I'll go more in-depth about the normal shock inlet versus the modular common inlet duct when we go over the F-16C later in the video. For now, just know that the normal shock inlet is an indicator that the F-16 is running a Pratt & Whitney engine. The divider right at the center of the intake is there to heat up the air coming in to prevent icing around the intake and in the engine. If we zoom in over to the intake, we can see the fan blades of the engine. The L-shaped protrusion on the outside of the intake is a ram air hood scoop. The F-16A Block 10 uses the Pratt & Whitney F100 PW220 engine with about 9,000 kilograms force of afterburner thrust. Now, let's go to the cockpit. In the original draft of the script, I went full crazy with the cockpit and described what each gauge and switch did, even if it didn't have that much effect on the game. So to avoid unnecessary information dumping for something you have no use for, I'll just name each major panel and explain briefly what they do. Although this is the case, I still have the original draft of the script and I aim to rewrite it in a blog format to be posted on a blog. This will include the switchology of the F-16A cockpit. But for now, let's continue. The first thing that stands out in the cockpit of the F-16A is the HUD panel. This includes the HUD, which tells you the most important information about your aircraft such as airspeed in knots, altitude in thousands of feet, and G-forces acting upon the aircraft. The gun sight can switch between 3 modes. The sight mode standard, which is denoted by the LCOS at the lower left of the HUD. LCOS stands for Lead Computing Optical Sight, and is also denoted by a big circle at the center of the HUD, which will show the lead of the 20mm shells during a dogfight. Sight mode cannon on ground is a cockpit sight for CCIP for guns, and sight mode rockets is CCIP for rockets. Switching your source management system to a bomb, whether guided or not, also shows the bomb sight. To the left of the HUD is the angle of attack indicator, which tells you if you have a positive AOA, negative AOA, or 0 AOA. And to the right is the NWS AAR indicator, which is used for nose wheel steering and air-to-air refueling. Under the HUD adjustment knobs is the central panel, which contains the airspeed, altitude indicator, HSI panel, angle of attack gauge, and compass. Under that is the screen for the radar, which is also used for TV guidance. The ejection tab can also be seen underneath the screen. The F-16 uses the ACES-2 ejection seat. To the right is the engine and fuel information panel, which also includes a duplicate attitude gauge. To the left is the RWR panel, and below it is a multifunctional display. And the left includes various switches for weapon stores. The F-16 is particularly peculiar in that the control stick is not in between the pilot's legs but is instead placed to the right-hand side of the cockpit opposite the throttle control. These sticks, in addition to controlling aircraft throttle and orientation, control the weapons release and radar controls. I want to talk more about this, and you'll see more in the blog post in the future. Stay tuned, because originally with the switchology and naming individual gauges and switches, this section was about 7 minutes long. And I don't think I want to bore you with lecturing you how each switch on the F-16 works, especially if you don't actually use them in War Thunder, because I don't think Sim actually reflects all of these switches and their functions. So let's just leave it for a blog post if you're really interested in learning how the F-16's cockpit works. Of course, you can also know this with DCS, but, you know, I just want to make the blog post because I really like the F-16. Anyways, I gotten off on a tangent, so let us continue. Now that we're done with the cockpit, we continue our examination of the fuselage. But before we go there, let's take one look at outside of the cockpit. As you can see, the port on the 20mm M61A1 gun has 4 vents on the front and 4 on the rear. On the F-16C, which you will see later, there are only 2 vents in the rear. Hello, post-editing doc here. I just realized that the F-16A ADF of the US has the same 4x4 vents like the F-16A Block 10, but the F-16A ADF of the Italian Air Force in the Italy Tech Tree has the F-16C's 2 vents only. The 2 vents is also present on the F-16A MLU, which is understandable because the F-16 MLU does have the F-16C's airframe. So that's just an interesting thing that I've noticed, and it's actually pretty cool that Gaijin modeled the twin vents on the F-16A ADF for Italy. It's attention to detail that I appreciate. Behind the cockpit of the F-16A is the indicator light, and behind that is a TACAN antenna. Behind the serial number with a peculiar shape is the fuel hatch for air-to-air refueling. The wings have 8 hardpoints, 6 of which are for air-to-air missiles, and 4 of which are for ground ordnance. 2 of them, namely Stations 3 and 7, are common hardpoints that can carry either air-to-air or air-to-ground ordnance. The F-16 also has a 5th station, but is often used for the centerline drop tank. On the underside of the fighter jet, just between the landing gear and the ventral tail fin, is the APU door, and behind that is the field arrestor hook. The leading edge of the wings of the F-16 are raised about 5 degrees above the fuselage streak when on the ground. In the hangar, the F-16 flaps are raised, if you can see here, but in takeoff mode and landing, we can see them lowered. The ailerons at the end have static dischargers, which also deflect lightning from the aircraft. These static dischargers are also present in the horizontal stabilizers and the rudder. Now we go to the rear part of the F-16A. We start with the nozzle. The nozzle is fully closed in the hangar and opens when WEP is activated. The speed brake flanks the exhaust nozzle from the left and right. When landing, the speed brakes are restricted to 43 degrees to avoid hitting the ground. This is not present in War Thunder from what I recall. Flanking the speed brakes are the horizontal stabilizers. These are the smaller horizontal stabilizers. Future F-16 variants will have the larger stabilizers like the F-16A ADF. The base of the rudder is the thin F-16A series island. The rear of the base contains a taillight and an RWR antenna. Under the fuselage, we see the chaff and flare dispensers. These are the AN ALE-40 chaff and flare dispensers with a total of 60 charges. In real life, the right dispenser is only for chaff and the left dispenser is only for flares. But of course, in-game, they can be customized. Now we're done with the walk around of the F-16A, let's talk about the F-16A Block 10's radar. As I've said before, the radar the Block 10 uses is the AN APG-66 radar. An I-band radar with about 60 kilometers of range, it has beyond visual range mode and air combat maneuver mode for dogfights. It has 2 modes, pulse Doppler and non-pulse Doppler search and track. It is also fitted with an IFF interrogator. It allows CCIP, CCRP, and the enhanced envelope gun sight or the lead computing optical sight. So for War Thunder, the lead computing optical sight and the EEGS are combined into one feature, the EEGS. So if an aircraft has EEGS, it means it either has a lead indicator in the cockpit, which also translates the lead indicator in the crosshair in third-person view, or the funnel sight that you see in more modern aircraft like the F-16C, Mirage 2000, and MiG-29. So now we wrap up the tour of the Block 10 with its weapons. Its standard gun is the M61A1 20mm cannon, mounted on the port side with 512 rounds of ammunition firing at a rate of 6,000 rounds per minute or 100 rounds per second, giving the F-16s about 5 straight seconds of fire. The air-to-air missile armament of the F-16A Block 10 consists of a maximum of 6 AIM-9J missiles, a rear aspect only missile with 20 Gs of maximum overload. This is also its stock missile. The upgraded missile is the AIM-9L Sidewinder, all aspect capable and 30 Gs of overload with better range over the 9J. The ground ordnance of the F-16 consists of the 500-pound Mark 82 and 2,000-pound Mark 84 unguided general-purpose bombs and their high-drag counterparts, the Mark 82 Snake Eye and the Mark 84 Air Bomb. BLU-27B incendiary bombs are also usable. For rockets, it gets 6 pylons of FR Mighty Mouse rockets for a total of 114 rockets. Guided ground ordnance consists of the GBU-8 TV-guided 2,000-pound bomb, and the AGM-65B Maverick TV-guided missile. Now that we're done with the F-16A Block 10 for the United States, we take a look at the other Block 10 variants in other nations. We start with the Nets. The Net is the name the Israeli Air Force gave to the F-16A Block 5 and Block 10s that were delivered in 1980 and 1981 to the Israeli Air Force. Most of these were stocks intended to be sold to the Imperial Iranian Air Force, but were quickly diverted to Israel due to the Iranian Revolution in 1979. They are the same inside and out to Block 10 F-16s, but they do not have access to GBU-8s, and an additional air-to-air missile is included, the Python 3. The Python 3 is an all-aspect capable missile with 40 Gs of turn, and a large, almost off-bore sight capability for its uncaged seeker. While the F-16A cannot fully utilize the Python 3's capabilities due to a lack of helmet sighting devices, the Python 3 is still a step above the F-16A Block 10's armament and is only superseded by the next F-16A variants we will be discussing. The F-16AJ is the Japanese F-16 that technically did not exist. The F-16AJ has so little information around it aside from a brochure made by General Dynamics that we aren't even sure what exactly it had or did not have. The F-16AJ we have in game is based off a YF-16A-72-1568 testbed and has all the weapons it had attached to it. This includes the Sparrows, which were removed after the YF-16A was included because continuous wave illuminators were not implemented. In short, the F-16AJ is a fantasy, a what-if plane based off a testbed that pointed to weapons that it could have rather than what it actually had, or the fact that it actually existed at all. It's in a position worse than the Yak-141 in that a proper F-16AJ was never built nor was a mock-up ever made. But in a tech tree with the R2Y2, it's just par for the course. The F-16A Block 15 ADF is an air superiority variant developed for the American Air National Guard. This variant wholly removes the ground attack capability of the F-16A but allows it to use AIM-7M Sparrows. The characteristic feature of the F-16A Block 15 ADF are the AN/APX-109 IFF interrogators, characterized by the bird slicer antenna on the front of the canopy. Another subtle external difference is the larger horizontal stabilizer on the F-16A Block 15 ADF. Spotlights were also introduced on the port side of the nose to help intruder identification. The F-16A Block 15 ADF also has TACAN antennas under the nose to help for navigation. This is part of the Block 15 OCU upgrades which ran in conjunction with the ADF upgrades. The tail also has bulges on the base and a vent right above the nozzle. The F-16A Block 15 ADF entered service in 1989 and today it has been completely replaced by the F-16C in the role. Italy also leased some 30 F-16A ADFs in 2001 and received them in 2003. They bore no differences from the American ADFs and used the same armaments. In 2012, the Italian Air Force phased out the F-16 ADFs upon the arrival of Eurofighter EF-2000s. The final F-16A variant we will be discussing today is the F-16A MLU. In this case, or whenever referring it to the Taiwanese F-16s, it's called the Block 20 to denote its difference from Belgian MLUs, despite having very little difference from them. The differences of the Block 20 include a different kind of bird slicers from the ADF, the AN/APX-111 IFF interrogators with a larger base for the vertical stabilizer housing a parachute, the AN/APG-66V3 radar, now with trackless scan capability, beer can RWR receivers on the wings, and newer AN/ALE 47 chaff and flare dispensers, totaling of 90. Its cockpit layout is similar to the Block 50 and has night vision capability, although the latter is not present in-game. It could also fire AIM-9Ms and AIM-9P4s, but neither of these are also in its weapon stocks, along with the AIM-120 AMRAAM. The cockpit also has a switch to deploy the drag chute, but the drag chute is spelled with an S. In 1985, a program was launched for the F-16 called the Alternative Fighter Engine Program to both keep the prices down for the engines and maintain a steady supply of aircraft engines when necessary. The alternative to the Pratt & Whitney F-100 engines was the General Electric F-110. The F-16C then featured a common engine bay that accommodated these two engines interchangeably. Along with this, a common inlet duct was also considered. However, the larger modular common inlet duct, or the big mouth duct, supplied more air than the Pratt & Whitney engine could ever utilize. Hence, those with Pratt & Whitney engines were fitted with the F-16A's NSI, or normal shock inlet, the one that's on the F-16A Block 10 we saw earlier. Block designations were also upgraded for this new change. General Electric equipped aircraft were given the designations that ended in 0, such as Block 30, Block 40, and Block 50, while Pratt & Whitney equipped aircraft were given designations that ended in 2, such as Block 32, Block 42, and Block 52. Block 30 and 32s also had a full integration of the AMRAAM, allowing multiple target tracking with them. In 1989, a new variant of the F-16C arrived, this time capable of using the Lantern targeting and navigation pod. Because of this, the F-16C Block 40 received a new HUD unit called the Wide Angle Raster HUD, which allowed the Lantern display to be projected onto the heads-up display. Along with this, it received GPS navigation and an upgraded AN/APG-68 radar, the V5 improving its service life by reducing mean time between failures. Or increasing. I'm not sure. I think it's increasing. I was just mush-braining it when I was typing this. Newer AN/ALE 47 chaff and flare dispensers were also added, and the enhanced envelope gun sight capability was introduced. The United States Air Force wanted to designate the new upgrade as the F-16G. However, Congress would not approve of a new aircraft designation well into the F-22 Raptor program, which could threaten the security of the F-22 Raptor. Hence, the F-16CG and DG would just be called the F-16C and D, Block 40 or Block 42. Israel received Block 40 F-16s in 1991 to supplement their Block 30s received during Peace Marble II. They received the name Barak for the F-16C and Barak II for the F-16D. Israeli F-16Ds were the first F-16Ds to have the enlarged spine for extra electronics. This would eventually become standard for F-16D Block 50 and Block 52s in other countries. This enlarged spine also housed extra countermeasure pods for the F-16D. Israelis also have the characteristic extended vertical stabilizer base, not for storing parachutes, but rather to store extra electronics and radar warning and homing system receivers. The indicator lights on the Barak intakes are noticeably larger, owing to the Lockheed Martin Defense Systems AN/ALQ-178 Rapport 3 ECM system. The Elbit Dash system was also integrated on the Barak 2s as it received the new Rafael Python 4 missiles in the 1990s. As said again, more countermeasure dispensers were added by the Israelis, especially on the dorsal spine, allowing a total of 200 countermeasures to be mounted on the Barak 2. In late 1991, the improved performance engine program for the F-16s upgraded the engines to the Pratt & Whitney F-100, PW-229, and the General Electric F-110 GE-129 engines. outputting more thrust and reducing weight. The new variant also included suppression of enemy air defense capability by allowing it to utilize the AGM-45 Shrike and the AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missiles. For this reason, the US Air Force once again tried to rename this new variant as the F-16J, but was rejected for the same reason as the F-16G. Thus, this new F-16C variant was given the designation F-16C or D Block 5052. An even newer variant of the AN/APG-68 was introduced, the AN/APG-68 V7, improving range and reliability. With the integration of the Lightning II pod, F-16Cs have returned to the wide-angle conventional HUD that we see in the cockpit today. In 2001, F-16C, D Block 4042, and Block 5052 models underwent CCIP upgrades. The Common Configuration Implementation Program introduced newer technologies onto the F-16Cs, such as Lockheed Martin Sniper XR pods in the Joint Helmet-Mounted Queuing Sight. CCIP F-16 Block 52s can be identified with the AN/APX-113 Advanced IFF Interrogator bird slicer antennas on the nose, even more advanced than the AN/APX-109 and AN/APX-111 IFF Interrogators on the F-16A ADF and F-16A MLU respectively. You can tell that this is the AN/APX-113 because it is closely packed together like the 109, but it is not on a platform as you see on the ADF. As of today, the F-16C has been upgraded further to receive the AN/APG-68 V9 radar and in the future is slated to receive the AN/APG-83 Scalable Agile Beam Radar or SABR. F-16Cs have been AIM-9X capable since 2004 after the CCIP upgrades and are also capable of launching AGM-65G Mavericks and the AGM-154 Joint Standoff Weapon. Now let's take a look at the cockpit differences between the F-16A, F-16C, and F-16D. The first thing we see with the F-16D and F-16C is that they're very similar except for one subtle difference. The left-hand side of the F-16D's cockpit is in black and white, while the F-16C has two color MFDs. The wide-angle conventional HUD is also present with the enhanced envelope gun sight or the funnel gun sight. The F-16C and F-16D HUD also uses markers to denote targets being tracked by your radar and being locked on by your air-to-air missile. The HUD adjustment knobs have also been replaced by a command console that can perform nearly all the tasks for the radar and the INS and communication that aren't performed by the side sticks. My one chief complaint about the F-16C cockpit is that it has a JHMCS feature, but the JHMCS sensor is not present anywhere in the cockpit where it should be. And maybe the part that the RWR buttons aren't modeled, but on the F-16As, they are. Externally, the F-16C differs from the F-16A in many ways. From the front, we can see the nose landing gear door have lights. Air scoops are also present on the F-16C fuselage. The AN/APX-113 bird slicers on the nose are similar in appearance to the AN/APX-109 on the ADF, but are of different models. As I've said, the AN/APX-109 is raised on a small platform, while the AN/APX-113 are directly mounted onto the nose. The Barak 2, being a two-seater, has the rear canopy untinted. And before I move on, take a look at the markings on the default skins of the F-16C and the Barak 2. They clearly say US Air Force F-16A Air Force serial number 000000. And to the right, the warning about explosive charges in the canopy remover has the word contains misspelled twice. The gun port on the F-16C and F-16D has only two vents as mentioned before. The beer can RWR on the wings are present like in the MLU. There are now 3 flare dispensers on the left side of the F-16C as opposed to one on each side. There's still only one chaff dispenser on the right side. In the Barak 2's case, it still has one of each under the fuselage, but 4 chaff dispensers have been added onto the larger dorsal spine as part of the electronics package. The top of the vertical stabilizer contains a new RWR receiver. It's part of the new AN/ALR 56M RWR that can track and identify up to 16 threats. The base is considerably larger, called the Island. This is because during the F-16C upgrade program, it was expected that the F-16C and F-18C would receive the AN/ALQ-165 Airborne Self-Protection Jammer or ASPJ. However, Congress abruptly and suddenly terminated the program, leaving the F-16Cs with an empty island which was larger compared to the F-16A. The Barak 2 just has a large dorsal spine extending from the back of the canopy to the end of the vertical stabilizer. Now let's go to the armament of the F-16C and F-16D. The F-16C and F-16D have very similar armaments. They both have the same 512-round M61A1 20mm gun. Both have AIM-9L, AIM-9M, and AIM-7M missiles, but the difference is the Barak starts with the AIM-9P rear aspect-only missiles. For ground ordnance, they have the same unguided ordnance, except Israel uses more bomb varieties from 500 pound, 750 pound, 1000 pound, and 2000 pound bombs, while the F-16C only uses 500 pound and 2000 pound bombs. The US F-16C also has access to Hydra and FFAR rockets. The Barak does not. For guided ordnance, they use the same paveway bombs, GBU-12, but everything else is different. The US F-16C uses the GBU-24, while the Barak uses the GBU-16 and GBU-10. The Barak also has access to the GBU-15V2B TV-guided bomb with thermal imaging, while the F-16C has access to AGM-65D Mavericks. The F-16 Fighting Falcon or Viper, whichever you prefer, is one of my favorite series of aircraft. As a child playing Ace Combat 4 Shattered Skies with my father, who preferred the F-14, the F-16 was my primary choice as a contrast or a foil to him. It's actually one of the very few reasons I've stuck with War Thunder for so long, just hoping that the F-16s will eventually arrive, and I guess all the waiting paid off. I love playing the F-16. I love LARPing and ground RB with friends.
Get him.
Oh yeah, no, I just shot right at his lower plate. Get his ass, please. He smoked up and I tracked him. There we go, he's dead. Eat shit.
Splash one.
Good kill.
Good kill.
And the entire F-16 experience is just unrivaled. Now, I hope this lengthy, almost autistic video about the differences between the F-16 models has at least given you some interesting but otherwise less than useful information about the F-16s in-game. Originally, I wanted to do small details about the F-16C, F-16D Barak 2, and the MiG-29 SMT, but I saw it more fit to just compare all the F-16s we currently have in-game. And of course, there's still a lot more to come. For China, there's still the F-16V Block 70-72 that Taiwan is currently in the process of receiving. Israel still has the F-16C Barak and the F-16I Sufa. And, if you consider it a member of the F-16 family, the Japanese Mitsubishi F-2 Viper Zero. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Without your support, I would not have been able to buy a newer, more decent microphone to make this video with. Once again, I thank you so much. This is the Dr. MD, and as always, Godspeed.